All right. So, Zach, I am so excited that you're here to chat with me today. So,
Hey.
today I was meeting with a group of like 100 educators, and we used an app called Meeting Pulse to kind of vote up our most compelling questions right now about trying to universally design instruction while students are at home, like when we're virtually supporting them. And the big question is, what do we do to support students who have, more significant complex disabilities and needs when we're thinking about designing that learning? And so we talked about kind of two different things. The first was clearly there's some really significant technological barriers. So some of our students don't have access to devices. Some of our students don't have access to the internet. And so that kind of lends itself to its own design issues. But just for a second, imagine that we can eliminate those barriers. So if we can get our students to access at least a device in the internet, and we want to design learning that can truly meet the needs of all learners, how could we design it so that it's much more inclusive of students with more significant disabilities? And as you answer that, it would be awesome too to introduce yourself a little bit, because I told everyone, you are the guru, you are the UDL guru, and how to make things more accessible for some kids with some more complex learning needs.
Okay, sweet. Excited to be here. And so Zach Smith, I'm a special education teacher for 8 years out in California. And then I helped with a district-wide rollout of UDL in a small district out in California. And then now I'm in graduate school at Harvard's Graduate School of Education, pursuing my doctorate in education leadership. So I'm kind of all over the place, but students with disabilities really are a starting place for me in terms of like instructional design and thinking. I have siblings with Down syndrome, and so all of this has been something that's been very alive and well in my life for a long time. So we're in a really like crazy time. I think we're all kind of living in that in this moment, and I'm really glad that that question came up so quickly as on people's minds, because oftentimes
That was Lindy, my sister, calling me. You can ignore that.
it's fantastic. So oftentimes folks don't think about students with more complex needs, and so knowing that that's a question that's on people's mind is really great. If we were to account and assume that the bandwidth is high, students have access to devices, now we're moving into like, well, how then do we design? So first, UDL should be the primary lens that you're designing from. So anything that you put out into a digital space, think about how you can represent it differently, how you can make it visual, how you can even like give a recipe, if you will, for parents for how they can make it like tactile, something that kids can actually do and see and experience and hold in their hands, as well as text-based or audio, video. If you can think and practice your UDL kind of ability, stretch the UDL muscle and really apply it to whatever message, not only like activity, but you also have to think about the messages you're putting out. So like the directions that you're giving to an activity, as well as the activity itself. It'll really help not only students with more profound needs, but also all your kids to be able to access the type of experiences that you're putting out. So UDL is your starting place. I would really encourage you to practice applying UDL as much as you physically can. So that's one thing to just put in space, right? The other thing that I would encourage folks to do is actually to start from the lens and vantage point of a student with, let's say, intellectual delay. You really need to show where the academics are already swirling around that person, right? And you need to create experiences where kids actually go out and find the academics that they're already living in. So a real practical example, let's say we're trying to look at, normally we would teach the kids cause and effect, or let's do conflict. We teach the kind of rise in action, the conflict resolution of a story. We teach that by having them read a story. You could do that online right now, and I'm sure lots of people are, but also could you tether to that, finding the rising action and the problem and solution to a video that kids watch, and have them use the same type of vocabulary, use the same type of kind of expectations that you'd have with that text-based representation to a video-based representation. Thinking about like pricing, how much things cost, and pulling out the academics related to math that is common daily math. Think of like recipes and cooking and just how much great academics is there. If you can design experiences that are based on the day-to-day functional skills of life and highlight how they're undergirded by all this great academics, it's going to be more accessible for kids who really need that tangible real life experience. And it's also going to be more interesting for those kids that don't want to do another worksheet. They don't want to be like handed another low DOK level task and have to work in front of a computer all day, every day. So I really think if we can leverage and think about the needs of our more complex students from the beginning, they're actually going to open doors to fun learning that all our kids are going to appreciate, benefit from, and even gives you a time and place where the adults can understand what it is that we're trying to ask of the kids too. Because, you know, even as an adult level, I'm sitting working with my kids on that table, and we're running into the same thing. Like, I don't want to coach Grace through another worksheet. I would much rather have a teacher give me a recipe or tell me to find a recipe that our family's interested in and highlight a few key core math concepts. That would be much more accessible for a kid with profound disabilities. But it's just interesting. It's just much more interesting overall. So that was a bit of a ramble. I'll pause and see.
So one of the things that it really struck me is the things that you're talking about here are almost like the options are almost technologically agnostic, I guess you could say, in that if you were saying like, all right, I'm an ELA teacher, I create a little mini lesson for parents, and I say, you know, families, kids, everyone, like, let me give you the long and short about like conflict and plot curve. And I'm going to give you an example. And now, you know, if you have a book at home, keep reading that, read it out loud, read it silently. Let me know what's the conflict, what's the action. If you want to watch a TV show, if you want to watch this video, if you're playing a video game, you know, what conflict are you trying to avoid, trying to solve? Then I'm almost eliminating the issues of like, well, my internet is lagging, or I don't have enough broadband to watch a video, but I have a book at home, or I can watch a TV show tonight and I can tell you what the conflict is. And so the next question that we had is, you know, you're giving these great examples, but we're also assuming, we made some assumptions that there is parental support at home, that there is internet, and that there is a device. Now, what do we do for kiddos with more intellectual variability? What do we do if they don't have the parental support at home? You know, the parents are essential workers, there's no childcare, or they don't have a device, or like, is there any design consideration there that we can create meaningful learning experiences that kids can almost work on, I mean, almost independently, if not independently?
It's a great question. And it's a really important question because of the nature and kind of the way that the amount of needs that this population represents. One thing to consider and remember is that really when we're talking about students that are in the 1% of our school populations, or even the 0.5% of school populations, it is very unlikely that they're not going to also not have some care provider at home living, working alongside them, making sure that they're safe, making sure that they're supported, and that they're cared for. And so really what the design pivots to is you're designing for that care provider. You're designing experiences that might be very specific to the needs of that individual kid. And so in that case, it might be jumping, if there's no technology, it might be jumping on the phone and having those one-on-one conversations as a teacher and just giving a little bit of guidance, a little bit of coaching specific around that student's individualized IEP or their individual education plan, their IEP, and coaching, supporting them